to, or welcome back to Heathen Tales, the podcast where we take a deep dive into Christianity and the insanity that it breeds. I'm your host, the Heathen Tales, and today we'll be discussing more topics that led me out of faith and into reason. Today's topic is epistemology. Epistemology. What is it? This particular ology has to do with understanding how knowledge is gained, justified, and evaluated. Your epistemology helps you to answer such questions as, how do you know that? Is that belief a justified belief, or is it more akin to opinion? Can we know this for certain? Can we know anything for certain, or is knowledge probabilistic at best? Basically, epistemology is the mental toolbox with which we can really get at knowledge. We use this toolbox to build a bridge between the subset that is our belief over to its parent that is knowledge. Epistemology allows us to evaluate the validity of claims to knowledge, and needless to say, not all epistemologies are created equal. Some epistemologies are only good for constructing echo chambers, the bane of skepticism. However, epistemology properly applied can reveal to us our own confirmation biases. That's why the call-in show Atheist Experience premises their entire show upon the preface, what do you believe and why? The why being the most important part. How do you know that? This particular question is really getting at the heart of what is your epistemology? By what vehicle did you arrive at that conclusion? One such confirmation bias I used to have, and that I've heard plenty of others express, is that the Bible says it, I believe it, therefore it is true. But is this good epistemology? 1 Peter 3:15 says, and quote, be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you, with meekness and fear. In order to fulfill this verse's call to reason, I delved into a plethora of apologetics, and eventually I would discover, with much despair, that the same reasons I had for being unconvinced of Islam or Hinduism disqualified my Christianity as well. Cognitive dissonance reared its unsettling head, and the more I sought to be completely objective and honest in this pursuit of a good reason of the hope that was in me, the more it became apparent that there are no good reasons to believe this. Mind you, there are plenty of reasons, just not any good ones. Not any that justify faith in Yahweh while withholding faith in Allah. You see, faith is terrible epistemology. Let me explain why. Hebrews 11:1 gives a clear definition of the word faith, and that's the definition that most reflects the colloquial use anyways of the word, thankfully. So this verse is what I'm going to mean by the word faith moving forward. Faith as a term is like the shell game of semantics. The definition of what that word means all too conveniently shifts and morphs to fit whatever apologetic is being used in the moment. I don't want to do that. So instead of going to the Encyclopedia Britannica or trying to interpret Greek even though I have no expertise in that realm, I'm just going to read what the Bible says. Hebrews 11:1 says, quote, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The evidence of things not seen. Now, what's the antecedent of that? Faith. Faith is the evidence. Read the verse carefully. The believing in things hoped for is the evidence of things not seen being factual. Let's tie this understanding of faith together with another passage to further legitimize my usage of the word. Romans 8, verses 24 and 25 state, quote, for we are saved by hope, but hope that is seen is not hope. For what a man seeth, why doth he yet hope for? But if we hope for that we see not, then do we with patience wait for it. And according to Hebrews chapter 11, the very substance of things hoped for is faith. Romans chapter 8 just so happens to be talking about the redemption of the body, that the idea that we are going to receive a perfect, immortal, deathless, unaging body. Obviously, there's no substantial evidence for that. It's not something that they could see around them and stuff. It's just something that they hoped would happen in the future. So it required faith. Hebrews chapter 11 goes on to give plenty of examples of this, that the entire reason Noah built the big-ass boat, even though he'd never seen it rain before, is because he believed in something he had no evidence for at the time. Ever heard the phrase, shit in one hand and wish in the other, see which one fills up faster? Yeah. Epistemology based on empirical evidence is the shit, while epistemology based on hopeful thinking is simply wishing. Good epistemology says, hey, let's evaluate that claim. While faith shouts from the rooftops, the Bible says it, I believe it, therefore it must be true. Just how devout Muslims say, the Quran says it, I believe it, therefore it's true. Agree or I'll fucking kill you. Belief claims like that based on authority are dog shit. The Bible says it, I believe it, it's true is an argument from authority that in no way justifies believing what the Bible says because that's what it says, than it does in justifying believing what the Quran says because that's what the Quran says.
Mama said that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Faith, and by proxy belief via authority, has no working mechanism with which to evaluate the claim that's being made. If epistemology is our toolbox for constructing belief systems, then faith is the Tonka brand of that toolbox. Yes, you can build a knowledge claim with it, but it can readily be toppled with no more than a nudge. Unless you're a whiz at building strong shit with flimsy supplies, MacGyver style. And that, my friend, is a metaphorical answer to why very intelligent people often believe very dumb shit. High intelligence often allows one to more eloquently jump through the hoops of doubt. Smart people have more in their toolbox with which to justify bad beliefs to themselves. That's why I make such an effort to distinguish people from their beliefs. I didn't gain any IQ points becoming an atheist, and I don't think people are dumb just because they're religious. The Dunning-Kruger effect refers to this very cognitive bias. Most often people with low ability or expertise tend to overestimate their competence in a particular skill, while those with higher ability tend to underestimate said competence in themselves. This phenomenon occurs because people who lack knowledge or skills in a specific area are often unaware of their incompetence, and, as a result, believe they are more knowledgeable or skilled than they truly are. Let me use an embarrassing example to demonstrate. Initially, for some odd reason, I thought playing guitar involved pressing my fingers between the strings on the fretboard to produce different notes. But shortly thereafter I learned that pressing down on the strings themselves shortened the vibrating length, thus creating higher notes on frets farther down the board. As I progressed, I learned which frets produced which notes, how to bend said vibrating strings, how to play pinch harmonics, strumming patterns, etc. Now, those things never even crossed my mind while playing. That knowledge is obviously still there, but now that those skills are so thoroughly ingrained, my mind is freed up to focus on other things. What does this have to do with epistemology, you might ask? Metacognition. Metacognition, or the ability to assess one's own knowledge and understanding, can actually be impaired in some people with limited expertise, leading to a lack of self-awareness and critical thinking. As a result, they tend to struggle to recognize the gaps in their knowledge. This can make it difficult for them to assess their own competence. Consequently, they tend to overestimate their understanding and erroneously believe they possess more knowledge than they actually do. Ever heard of imposter syndrome? Highly knowledgeable people may doubt their abilities or feel like imposters because they're more aware of how much there is still to learn. Each new open door leads to two more. Contrary to once popular belief, the more we as a species learn about the universe in which we inhabit, the more complex it is than our imaginations gave it credit for. I don't know about you, but special relativity and quantum mechanics contain a lot more nuance than it's turtles all the way down. Lightning occurs when the buildup of electrical charges in the atmosphere becomes so great that the electrical potential difference between the ground and the clouds above reach a tipping point. If we as a civilization had simply called it a day at Zeus through that bitch, then we'd have gotten no further towards understanding the phenomena. Those are merely two quick examples of how science is vastly superior to authoritarian religious dogma. Dogma is the proverbial period at the end of the inquiry, whereas science offers us something more akin to a semicolon. Science proposes a hypothesis and then tries its damnedest to prove it wrong. The more times science fails to rigorously disprove said hypothesis, the more likely it is we're on the right track. Contrary to what conspiratorial apologists want you to think, science thrives on tearing down previous established notions. On the other hand, when faith is employed epistemologically to wrestle with these conundrums, it does so exactly ass backwards. While the scientific method seeks to disprove the claim, the religious method is to confirm the claim. What's the danger in that? Well, it gives our innate confirmation biases all the more building supplies to erect that aforementioned echo chamber. Confirmation biases are like assholes. We've all got them. And they all stink at this thing called objectivity. Science is a handy tool with which we can remove those pesky confirmation biases from the picture. This is accomplished by employing methods like control groups, randomization, double-blind testing, placebo control, replication, blind data analysis, peer review, just to name a few. This is methodological knowledge gathering at its finest, whereas religious faith merely wants you to kiss the rear end of your highness. Anyway, we've got one more segment to go before we call it a wraps on this episode. I used to be that kind of Christian Dan Barker self-deprecatingly warned you about. Man, I knew for certain that the Christian God existed. After all, I knew the guy, right? I had a deeply personal relationship with the man upstairs, and I was beyond adamant that nothing would nor could ever change my mind. But once I mustered up the courage to actually ascend those stairs in search of a more solid reason for the validity of my faith, I found the attic vacant. Cobwebs, musk, and all. Just as it is with prophecy, if multiple contradictory occurrences all fulfill your criteria for being convinced, it's time to go back to the drawing board. Your parameters are too loose. For century upon century, many a Christian sect has been absolutely convinced that they're living in the end times as prophesied in the book of Revelation and Matthew chapter 24 alike. However, those prophecies no more predict Armageddon than Nostradamus predicted 9/11. Too vague. One of the major evidences Jesus gave for his imminent return was that there would be wars going on in places. When has that ever not been the case? Shit, in the last chapter of the book of Daniel, God told Daniel that You'll know it's the end of time because people will go to and fro and learn things. What astounding foresight! Again, if these sorts of things don't convince me of Hinduism or Islam or any of those others, then it shouldn't convince me of the faith I had. One of the many freedoms I gained from shedding faith was the freedom to say, I don't know, and withhold judgment, similar to how innocent until proven guilty works. That's why I'm an atheist. I'm simply withholding my verdict on God's guilt of existence until if and when the burden of proof is met. If you like what you just heard and you want to support this fledgling podcast of mine, then if you would, just hit the subscribe and like button. It would help bunches. Appreciate it, hope you all the best, and I'll catch you on the next one.